Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Richard Kohut's Reasonable Rants. Um, Not sure whether or not this is going to take off, but this is a mini podcast that I'm starting up because I kind of have had, over the course of my life, basically I've loved to talk and rant. And I'm a very opinionated person. People who know me or listen to me on JOJ know this for a fact. My idol is basically Penn Jillette, and he's one of the most opinionated person in the world. And so yeah, I mean, whenever one of the things is I'm going to do a lot of these rants on the road in the car, and I'm going to call them Richard Kohut's Rants on the Road instead of Reasonable Rants because they might not be as reasonable. I'll be yelling a lot more because as I'll explain in that. It's the car, it's a completely isolated soundproof environment, and I can yell as loud as I want. Right now I'm recording in my room. It's 1:30 a.m. My parents are asleep a couple rooms away, and so I can't really yell. But yeah, these are basically because I love to talk and I have so much stuff that I want to talk about in my head that, I really don't have any place to talk about. Especially since I haven't, had the time or energy to write blog posts like I used to. Back when I had my blog running, I would do a weekly post. Granted, I would not rant that much on that, but that's something I'm thinking about doing if I have the time, which is tough to do now because I have two jobs. But either way, so I'm gonna try this out. I'm gonna try recording some thoughts on video whenever I have something that I want to rant about. And the first thing that I want to rant about is I'm a huge media guy. I love me some television. And I just got done watching one of my all-time favorite shows. Even if it is a propaganda show, basically. It's C.S.I. And I really just... As I was watching it, the thought occurred to me, mostly because it's not that this thought really occurred to me. I've been meaning to talk about this for a while, but basically, I hate the latest season of CSI. Absolutely hate it, hate it, hate it. And the reason is characters, which is kind of not really all that surprising. The reason you watch dramas is because of the characters. There's a reason why the show Seinfeld was called Seinfeld. There's a reason the Drew Carey Show was called The Drew Carey Show, because it was about these characters. It wasn't about the situations or even about the stories. You can even throw them away and it'll just be these characters in this interesting situation this week. That's basically what made Star Trek The Next Generation so great, and they knew it. They had Data, the android who longs to be human. That's an interesting character right off the bat. You had Will Riker, the rugged outdoorsman with a level head, a sense of humor, and just absolutely uncompromising morality. It's wonderful. Jean-Luc Picard, the sensitive guy who is absolutely steadfastly ethical, lives his life by his code of ethics. And, just so many great things. I mean, you could take any character from the Star Trek Next Generation and write up an entire psychological profile about them. I love it. And the problem is now, and I mean, there's a couple things I want to rant about. And first off, with CSI, the reason I hate this new season is because these characters. Starting off with the main character, the number one character, the head of the lab, Russell. Yeah. Let me just say right off the bat, I'll explain why. I'll lead you from point A to B to C in what was going on as I was thinking to myself and watching the episode. I was thinking, I don't care at all about Russell, like one single bit. And I'm almost about to quit watching CSI because the show is trying to be the Russell show now. I don't care about him in any way, shape, or form. And since I don't care about him, I don't care about the new number two character who is based entirely off of him. I've even forgotten her name because I care so little about her. But it's the character who was involved with Russell somehow, and whatever. She's just completely throwaway to me. And then, of course, the thing that made CSI great is back in previous seasons was because I absolutely cared about the character of Gil Grissom, and I especially cared about the character of Ray Langston. Then beyond that, I can go down the list of characters that I love and the characters that I could give two shits about. I love Greg Sanders. I love way back in the first seasons when he was transforming from CSI Tech, or one of the lab guys, to an actual CSI. That was the best. Best, best, best. Then we've got, after that, we got Doc Robbins. We've got, after that, we had Warwick Brown, but of course he's gone. And with him, the relationship between Warwick and what's his name? How do I forget his name? But basically, Nick Stokes. The entire reason to like Nick Stokes is because of the relationship that he had with Warwick Brown. Since half of that duo is gone now, it's like nobody really cares about Teller outside of Penn and Teller. Unfortunate, but true. And that's kind of how we feel about Nick Stokes. He's kind of end Teller. And I'm sorry, Teller, but you know what people think about you. You're great, though, anyways, and whatever. But, that's really all the characters that I care about. And they've gotten rid of 3 of them. So now the only ones left that I really care about are Greg Sanders, Doc Robbins, and then the lab guys. And that's it. I only care about 3 characters, and there's a firm reason why. And this is the crux that I'm getting to, is that I've played around with role playing a lot on the internet and in forums and such, and there's one thing I know about I think I could be a good writer about things, and it's because I realize that the real thing you need is a character who is built off of something. You have to have a core, as I call them, a core character. You have to have these characters that pull from something. They have a center. For example, one of the characters that I created back in the roleplay once is a character who basically had both of his parents die very young and was basically late middle school, early high school, too young to live on his own, and so sent to his aunt's house, but his aunt was very lenient, so his aunt basically let him live on his own with his little brother, and then he basically became parent to his little brother for a long, long time, and then near the end of high school, he sits out sick one day as the entire class, or the entire school, or whatever, goes on this field trip, and the bus crashes on the field trip, nobody survives. So basically, he's gone through losing his parents, and then becoming a parent, then losing his child, essentially. And you can see it yourself. That is a very complex character, and it pulls from something. He was basically a character who had come full circle and had learned what it was like from one point of view, and then he went into another point of view and learned what that was like. He is cohesive in that way. And then, of course, from there, he then the way I developed him through the RP was then that he would basically meet somebody else who then becomes parent to him again. Because, of course, you can imagine, basically, if you were looking after your younger brother for years alone by yourself during your formative years of your life, and then to lose him, you need some help. You need somebody to look after you, and that's exactly what the role played through as. And you can tell I don't even need to tell you any details about the story or any details about any of the role plays that I've done with him. You're interested in that character. It's like you can write up an entire psychological profile off of that alone. You can instantly imagine, in this situation he'd act like this, in this situation he'd act like this. And this is the thing that brings me back to Russell and C.S.I. When he was introduced, or let me put it even in a more simple way. I will compare Russell with Ray Langston from CSI. The first time we ever met Ray Langston, we could tell pretty much exactly what his character was, and then we could tell exactly what his character was based off of. His character was based off of the notion of that he is an intellectual, being a professor, of course, that he is an intellectual that also cares very deeply about doing the right thing. Not just because of it's his code of ethics and he has to follow it, it's that he cares very deeply on both an emotional and an intellectual level about doing the right thing and having the right things happen to people in the world. That was the character of Ray Langston. And you could and that was never needed to be said. It never needed to, you didn't need to get to know him over the course of a couple episodes. You knew who he was pretty much right from his first 2 or 3 episodes. And this brings me back to D.B. Russell. There's a way that there's 2 directions you can take when you're forming a character. And in terms of trying to make him interesting. And these are the 2 classic ways that TV producers, writers, etc. try to make characters interesting. Number 1, they create a character who people can understand, a complex character who does have a base that people are interested in him because of who he is, because they know who he is, and they can then relate to him. That was Langston. Then there are characters that people have interest in because they don't know who they are. People who basically are mysterious. You never know what they're going to do next. Not because they're unpredictable. You just have absolutely no idea what their backstory is, who they are, or what they stand for. You have no idea at all. And you're interested, and you have to keep watching because you want to figure that out. One way holds interest for a very, very long time. The other way does not. Basically, Russell was okay to watch for 2 episodes. And then he just fell completely off. I could care less about him. Because the bottom line is, I still don't know him as a character. I don't know what his base is, what he pulls from. They're trying to keep him mysterious. And it's like, you can only be mysterious for so long before you go, come on. What does he stand for? Who is he? What is he doing? I don't understand. I can't relate to him. So I can't be invested in him at all. And this is one of the things that made quite possibly one of my other favorite shows of all time, House MD, quite probably, the reason why it was one of the biggest shows on television is because of the character of House. He managed to blend the 2 together. You knew who he was and what he stood for, and it never needed to be said. He was the man who lived his life by his own code of ethics, and he was uncompromising in that. He stood for truth above all, and living his life based off of the truth and based off of reality. He was basically a more socially disregarding a socially disregarding version of James Randi, in that my entire life must be based on the truth and reality, otherwise I'm living in a fantasy and I might as well not be living at all, and neither should anyone else. The difference between him and James Randi is, of course, that Randi didn't go around pushing that in people's faces. You must live your life by the truth, otherwise you're wasting your goddamn life. Which is what House was. And that never needed to be said, because that was exactly what his character, who he was and what he stood for. It was his core. It was his center, and he built up off of that. And the mysteriousness came from the way that he interacted with all these new situations and all these new characters that were put in place around him, aka his patients, his team, Wilson, Cuddy. It was those interactions that is where the mystery came from, and that's what made him so compelling as a character, because you knew who he was, and you could relate to him, but he also had that air of mystery about him. You didn't really know what he was going to do next. And that was what made House great. It had absolutely nothing to do. It's quite possibly one of the most procedural shows on television. House gets a patient in an interesting way. He takes on that patient. He has an initial diagnosis, that's wrong. He has a next diagnosis, that's wrong. He has a third diagnosis, which, if he's wrong, it will lead to the death of the patient. But, oh no, they learned a new clue just before he was about to do that and kill the patient. And then the fourth diagnosis is some miracle revelation, and it happens to be correct. It's the most procedural thing in the world. Every single episode is based off of that linear progression of, oh, this theory is wrong, then this theory is wrong, this theory is going to kill him, but oh, it's also wrong. If this final theory is correct. It's the most procedural thing in the world. And if it weren't for Dr. House and his interactions, it would have made a completely boring show. But again, bringing this back to C.S.I. It's tough to follow that, because once you start talking about House, he is the ultimate character. I mean, it's like, you can't really follow that. But yeah, basically that's my ranting about characters, and why I absolutely hate, and why I'm going to probably stop watching C.S.I. after this season if Russell continues on and they continue to base characters off of him and things, because, you yeah. If there's one thing I know, it's characters, and I should know I've made myself into a character quite well, I think. I mean, hell, just take a look at what I've done in the juggling community. I have become about the equivalent of a household name in the juggling community, even though I have barely gotten past a qualify of 7 rings. I have only qualified 5 clubs once, and I can't do more than the 3-up 360 out of 5 objects. I am a crappy juggler by today's standards, When people like Laug Benjaminson are putting out videos of themselves doing tricks into a DB9 7531, doing 7-up 720s, and freaking just, oh my god. And yet, I'm able to be known in the community. Who the hell am I? I'm some fat guy in New Jersey who's learned to do a few cool things. I feel exactly like Penn Jillette feels about his thing, and I love it. It's all because, I'm a character, I know who I am, I know what my center is, and I work from that. And it comes off. People care about me. So, I really do hope they get rid of C.S.I. Russell. Yeah. I'm going to stop ranting now, because I could go on about characters forever. So thank you very much for watching. This has been Richard Kohut's Reasonable Rants, the first ever episode. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if you like this or not. Goodbye.